Back at our rain delay coverage, they have an announced start time of around 8:30, so keep your eyes on that. And as we zoom into the legends who have had their numbers retired, look top row, fourth from the right, number 15, Thurman Munson. It was 45 years ago that the Yankees announced that he had died in a plane crash on an off day, and he is being remembered tonight at the stadium and well beyond. So Thurman Munson, such a legend. I mean, Dave, just woven into the fabric of that catching position that have had some legendary catchers in pinstripes.
Yeah, I grew up a Yankee fan, a diehard Yankee fan. Roy White was my favorite player. Thurman Munson was my favorite catcher. I just always loved the toughness that he exuded, right? When he was on the field, he gave you this sense of leadership. Just by watching him on the game, you could tell that this guy was respected by everybody on his team, the opponents. I remember the clashes between the Red Sox, Carlton Fisk and Thurman Munson. I mean, it was just a great time of my life as a baseball fan growing up here in Queens, loving the Yankees. But Thurman was the guy. I loved the way he just warmed up, like his little practice swing. You know, he had that little waggle going on, and he could hit some balls left center right field, right center field. Just a special player. And the people that, once I got to the big leagues, as I started to talk to some of his former teammates, they would tell you how special of a man he was. The reason he was flying back and forth, he always wanted to be able to put his kids to bed every night that he could. It was an off day. He flew there, and that's when the tragedy happened.
You mentioned Queens. I wasn't too far from you growing up in Jersey City, and I remember this day succinctly because friends of mine and I were about to play wiffle ball, and someone was opening up some baseball cards. We had packs of baseball cards. You're looking for your favorite players. And then we heard the news about Thurman Munson. And I just remember that day, you didn't want to play anymore. You didn't want to move forward because he was that kind of player that people idolized and followed. And then when I was fortunate enough to get into having a sports writing career, first time I went into the clubhouse at Yankee Stadium, and you saw that they still had that empty locker there for him. They still had his uniform number. His shin guards were still there. And then one more thought is Jorge Posada becomes a terrific Yankee catcher. And from the earliest moments of his career, he had a picture of Thurman Munson in his locker because he wanted to carry on that legacy, that tradition of such a great Yankee captain and player.
So when I was in the minor leagues, the Yankees would allow me to go work out there in the wintertime, and I'd have a locker at Yankee Stadium. Imagine that. Yeah. I'm 17 years old walking into Yankee Stadium. I have my own locker. But I do remember Thurman's gear hanging in. They sealed it off, and you know, you almost felt you were like you were in a museum. And old Yankee Stadium was a museum. It was a baseball museum with all the history that was made there. But to see Thurman's gear that he wore in his last game just in that locker room while I was working out, it was a really special time.
You know what's amazing about him as a player, and the way Dave was talking about him as a great husband and father, a teddy bear, if you will, for his kids? Jack, if you just saw him and you were a 7- or 8-year-old kid from the Bronx walking up to Thurman Munson, you'd probably be intimidated just by his style of play and the way he looked, but he was the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think he wanted the opposition to be intimidated, but I think you're right. The way Dave described how he was as a husband and as a father, that was different than the Thurman Munson that we see right there on the field, the one who put up that career resume right there. And it's quite a resume from the Rookie of the Year to the MVP to the All-Stars and the Gold Gloves. And his career obviously ends short, and one of the conversations that has come up is about his Hall of Fame candidacy. And while he was on the ballot, guys, he never got more than 16% of the vote. I look at Roberto Clemente. When he passed away, numbers a lot bigger than Thurman Munson's, had the 3,000 career hits. The Hall of Fame actually waived the 5-year waiting period, and Roberto Clemente was inducted the next time he had the opportunity. With Thurman Munson, I often wonder, and I was just a kid back then, I have a Hall of Fame vote now. I never had the chance to vote for Thurman Munson, yay or nay. I just often wonder if there was a way to look at his career, factor in that tragedy, and say, well, if the guy only had the opportunity to play another 3 or 4 years, suddenly those numbers that statistically and numerically might look short of Hall of Fame standard or Hall of Fame quality right now, Dave, I think it's a lot different if we had that in there.
Yeah, and you saw what happened with Kirby Puckett, right? Puck's career was shortened as well. He didn't have the quote-unquote Hall of Fame numbers. He didn't get to 3,000 hits. He didn't get to 400 or 500 home runs, but he was still inducted. Thurman was a lot earlier on than Kirby Puckett. But as I look at that resume, 7 All-Star games, 3 Gold Gloves, a world champion, a captain, Rookie of the Year, that deserves another look. Because what he was able to do in a very short period of time was special. And I looked it up today after we were having that discussion. He threw out 41% of the base runners for his entire career. I think average now is probably low 20s.
Yeah.
He threw out 41% over his entire career.
Well, Jack, what we are finding with certain players that are on the modern-day ballot and then ones that are being re-looked at through, let's say, veterans committees, because of analytics, people are doing deeper dives into the numbers. Would that help Thurman's case at all?
Yeah, I think it would help his case. We talked about this in your office, Bob, before we came up. The thing is, and you brought up the hardware, yes, the All-Stars, the Gold Gloves, he's got the MVP, he has the Rookie of the Year. The thing is, if you're just talking about the counting totals, his numbers are always going to be a little short. He had 113 career home runs. He had about 1,600 career hits. So I do think that that is going to fall a little short for him. Jay Jaffe, who does a wonderful job covering the Hall of Fame, he has always put the idea out there that a WAR of about 60 is Hall of Fame quality. You look at baseballreference.com, Thurman Munson's WAR is at around a 46 or a 47. And the thing about those veterans committees, Bob, is a lot of people see them as the salvation. Well, let them get to those veterans committees. It's harder to get in through those than it might be to get in through the ballot, because the way that those are conducted, it's usually 8 or 10 candidates, and you're only getting sometimes 2, but most of the time it's only 1.
So I have 2 things to say. So that WAR count, right? But his career was cut short.
Yes.
So it can't go, it should not hurt him in the negative way. It actually should help him in a positive way. Say, well, he only played this X amount of years. Had he played another 5 years, could he have gotten that another 11 WAR, or he said 46 to 60. But again, my second point to think about is the catching position in the Hall of Fame. There's not a lot of catchers in the Hall of Fame. And I've always been one, not small hall, big hall. I know that there's those conversations. But if you're in the top 2% of baseball catchers in the history of baseball, should you not be considered a Hall of Famer? Right? I mean, it's not like there's 100. Or are they counting or comparing a catcher to Willie Mays in center field? Well, then very few there may not be any catcher. But you take a look at the qualities, the achievements, the postseason greatness that he also had. Yeah.